Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Kitchings Table. I'm your host, Earl Kitchings, and as always on Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m., what we like to do is bring you another fun-filled show of facts or news or information or whatever suits our palates for helping our listeners and our viewers to get some more knowledge or more wisdom or just something they can talk about each day. So today we're here again with you today, and as always, joining me is my co-host Ronline Cannady. Good morning, Ronline.
Morning, Earl. How are you this morning?
I'm good. So,
Great.
Ronline, let me ask you this question: If I was to ask you, has it been hot lately? What would you tell me?
Being that the spring is here, we have experienced some very warm days already.
But nothing hot yet. It hadn't gotten hot yet.
Not the way I know it to be, but I tell you what, when I see anything that's over 80, it
Is
makes
that
me
when you start
wonder.
saying it? Is that when
Yeah,
you start saying it's hot? When it's over
that,
80?
well, when it's over 80, I become concerned.
But at 90, you definitely know it's hot.
Yes, indeed.
Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today is temperature and how hot it's getting, how hot it's been. Going to mix in a little global warming to the conversation. But in in looking through newspapers or reading things on the internet, I ran across an article that said that Florida was the hottest state. And I was like, the hottest state? So I'm thinking maybe Florida is becoming warmer from a global warming standpoint. And to a degree, it is. In 2023, it was recorded that that was the hottest year of record in the history of the United States. 2023.
I do remember a couple of times I'm listening to the news. It says, "Hey, we've broken another record," and I'm like, "Okay, so I stopped at that point to see what the record high was that we have broken." And again, like I said, anything when it goes in those 80s and above, it's like it becomes very concerning. And I'm surprised that they're saying Florida is the hottest state when I hear about other states such as Arizona reaching over 100 degrees, like 115 and higher.
And that happens when people talk about an average temperature.
I see.
When
Okay.
you talk about 365 days, you add up all the temperatures and then you divide it by that 365 and it gives you an average.
An average. Okay.
Right. So it it's always amazing how those people who are reporting information and news will give you a number, a mathematical number, and if you don't understand how they're using it, the context they're using it in, you would question if what they're telling you is factual or actual. So if they tell you, well, yeah, Arizona, because you hear about days in Arizona, it's 102, it's 104. I mean, and that could be a few days in a row, and then it cools off, and then it rises back again. As in, with Florida, maybe Texas. For the most part, Florida, Texas, California have always been known as the hot and warm states. I think Arizona gets mixed in because at times in spring and summer it gets exceedingly hot, but they don't tell you about the temperature in Arizona from October to February when it's not hot.
Hmm.
It may be warm, but it's not hot. But if the temperature, the hottest year on record happened last year, you think, well, is that record going to be broken in 2024? And when the temperatures are that warm, what happened to the other things that support our living on this planet? The only planet in our solar system that sustains life as we know it, with the factual things of air and water being the two things we must have in order to live. That's not on the moon, on Mars, on Venus. You're definitely not going to see it on Venus.
Hmm.
It's just not sustainable. I mean, it's too close to the sun. No. And then when you get further away to the other planets, Jupiter, Saturn, it's too far away. Becomes too cold because it's so far from the sun. So we're perfectly situated. But as we talk about the temperatures of the planet and the places we live, once upon a time, we could count on, excuse me, 4 seasons. And up north and in the Midwest and out west and upper part of the West, they, excuse me again, they can have those 4 seasons. In Florida, not so much. We in North Florida, yes. South Florida, I was interesting reading that South Florida is kind of a subtropical state, part of the state. It's like they're always in the maybe 60s, but most of the time 70s and 80s.
Mhm.
But I bring these things forward simply because if we're experiencing the hottest year in the history of the nation, what other things are going on around us that are warming up? And the first thing that comes to mind is the water. And sea surface's temperatures are rising. Every year is hot for us. The water is getting warmer. And when the water gets warmer, that's not good for animal and plant life in our seas and ocean because they weren't built to live in warm water.
Yes, I remember when we did a segment before and we talked about the coral reefs and how we depend on the coral reefs to, function the way they are supposed to function normally. And as you said, if the algae starts increasing and start killing that plant life, then our sea, the food that we depend on from the sea, our marine life suffers. And so this is a perfect example of when it becomes too warm, that algae starts taking over. And it's hard to clean algae, when it hits the pools, the things that you have to do in order to get it back to get that algae removed and get that chlorine back the way it needs to be. That pH balance is what I'm trying to say, to get that pH balance back to anything, and that goes when it comes to our fresh water, keeping that pH balance so that we can use it on our skin, so all of that is important. Otherwise, we'll end up with some acute and chronic diseases. And we all know what happens once our bodies start getting plagued with disease.
Indeed. And as another reminder to folks, you can kill bacteria, but you
Hmm.
can't kill a virus.
Hmm.
So if disease or bacteria turns into a virus, or a virus is out there and it feeds on warm weather, we run into a situation of creating a bad health situation. So we have to be mindful that Mother Nature, as strong as she is, as temperamental as she is with the weather, she's still very fragile if we don't take care of it. And the cause of some of or most of these changes is from MAN.
Yes.
And that's not an acronym. That's just spelling of where a lot of this stems from. So when you talk about the algae and you hear about the red blooms in our oceans, especially here near Florida, where in the Gulf of Mexico it happens a little bit more frequently than on the Atlantic side. Those algae blooms or that red tide or whatever, that's from the plant life causing a reaction in the ocean. And when it causes that to happen in the ocean, uh, part of it is it washes up on the shore, on the beaches. The other part is it out there in the sea life. It might cover the coral reefs that provide food and nourishment for a lot of the animal life in the sea. So it's a domino effect. One thing affects the other. Now, when we turn to the opposite side of hot, what is your temperature when it's too cold? What number is that? I'm gonna show you just how much she's from Florida. Watch this.
All right. So one of my sisters said I should be okay with 54 degrees and above. She said anything below that, she was like, I need to be concerned. But 54, I should be able to function in 54 degrees. So,
54.
yes, degrees
Yeah,
Fahrenheit. Let me
I,
be.
I, yeah. Please don't say Celsius because we won't be here. I'm going to have to say I got to have it a little bit warmer than that.
Mm-hmm.
60 is mild and cool and okay, sweater, light jacket, okay. Uh, I would probably say somewhere between 62 and 65. Uh, okay, that's about as low as I want to go until we start talking about, well, it's somebody will say, well, it's just cool. It's like, well, it's cool for you. I don't really like cool or, and then when we talk about cold, now let me tell you, when it goes below 50, it's cold. It's cold.
Agreed.
All
Agreed.
right.
I'm
And
I need to be at least 74, 75.
year round, year
Mm-hmm.
round, I'm happy.
Mm-hmm.
But once it goes below that 50 mark and drops into those 40s, yeah, it's cold. And anything under that, and it's always interesting how people who live in the Northeast or the Midwest, you know, 50, 54 degrees, 55, 50, 60 degrees, man, they're like that. Man, that's summer weather. It's like summer for you.
Ew. Indeed.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
because y'all are always dealing with cold extremes. And then when it's in the 80s, they'll tell us what? Boy, it's
It's too
hot.
hot. Yeah,
It's
I'm
hot.
burning up. I'm burning up.
Man, it's not hot. This is nice.
Mm-hmm.
But the opposite side of the warming is that we must have a balance, like you said. It has to be hot and cold. And a couple of points that I ran across was that the Arctic is warming twice as fast as anywhere on Earth. The Arctic, not the Antarctic. The Arctic. Now, the Arctic is at the north, Antarctica is at the south. We don't talk much about, and I'm sure it's a phenomenon. It's like, well, how can all that ice stay on the planet and it's at the bottom? Well, I can't answer that. That's a scientific phenomenon. It's like, okay, because if you took a ball and you put some water on the bottom of the ball, it's gonna fall off.
Mm-hmm.
You put it on the top, it's gonna roll over and go to the bottom, and then it's going. But anyway, and then it says that the sea ice is declining by more than 10% every 10 years. So to put that in perspective so you'll understand, I want you to start with 10 ice cubes, 10 ice cubes, let that be the Arctic, and every 10 years, one of those ice cubes completely melts. So if you got it in water like the Arctic is or the glaciers are, they sit in water. They don't just, they sit in water. And as that ice melts, as we all know, when ice melts in the liquid rises up.
Mm-hmm.
So they're saying that the temperatures of the ice warming in both the north and south poles uh, creates warmer air temperatures, which disrupt the normal patterns of ocean circulation. Normal pattern of ocean circulation. So if it's flowing freely, it's like having your tap on when it's unrestricted. It just flows out. But if you block it off, it takes a different pattern. So it says Antarctica and Greenland have lost enough ice in the last 16 years, and this is coming from NASA. In the last 16 years, Antarctica and Greenland have lost enough ice in the last 16 years to fill Lake Michigan. And you got to know that when you talk about the five Great Lakes, Great Lake Michigan is probably the largest.
Mm.
And I think we take for granted the five Great Lakes as being lakes. You think about a lake and you can see from one shore across to another shore, but that's not what those lakes are. Those lakes are huge bodies of water. They're surrounded by land, but they are huge. So when you talk about a Lake Michigan being filled up, because the ships that we see bringing products and merchandise into ports like Jacksonville and Savannah, Baltimore, New York, those ships, they go into and they have ways to navigate into the Great Lakes so that they can get products to those states and Canada. So those are large bodies of water. But if we're seeing a loss of ice that is filling up, again, it causes the water levels to rise. And I think the people in states like New York, we think about New York and it's like, well, New York, yeah, it's a big city, yeah, it's at sea level. So when the water rises in New York and floods the subways and other parts of the city, it's not a stretch for that water to rise a couple of feet, and the next thing you know, it floods over. So they go on to say when air temperatures around Greenland are directly melting, it's causing the ice to basically what they call calve off into the ocean. And the statement says that Greenland holds enough ice to raise global sea levels as much as 23 feet.
Wow.
So we have to be concerned, and folks want to pretend that global warming is not a problem. Well, you let 23 feet of water come over your house and you be like, there is a problem. So when the
Yeah.
water,
Your
huh?
home may collapse under 20
Of
with 20.
23, yeah, you become your house becomes a coral reef. Okay, so the more water flows to the seas from glaciers and ice caps, and the ocean water warms and expands in volume. So ice melts, water volume expands. That's the gist of it. So, with that being said, now we hear the term global warming. We haven't a real idea of what it is. So I was like, well, what is the actual meaning, definition of global warming? And I know folks might be like, well, what does that have to do with Florida being the hottest state? Well, one thing affects the other. So once upon a time, if the average temperature in Florida, say 20 years ago, was 72 degrees, and now it's at 74 degrees. So in 20 years, it rose 2 degrees. I'm like, well, that's not a lot. It rises 2 more degrees. Now the average temperature is 80 degrees. That's pretty warm.
Yes.
You need to be concerned. But the phenomenon of increasing average air temperatures near the Earth's surface is what we define as global warming. When the air temperatures keep rising, and because the things that cause air to warm, uh, carbon dioxide gases, all these gases that are emitted, that causes the air to warm up. And there's nothing Mother Nature can do to combat that because it's inundated with that on a day-to-day basis, every day. We are looking at ways to cut down on it. That's why we're starting to see electrical vehicles. And although electrical vehicles will be an improvement to cutting down on those gas fumes and things of that nature, you now have the manufacturing of those particular products and the disposal of them. And we take minerals and things from the earth to make products. And then when we can't use them anymore, we take them in that form and throw them back in the earth and expect the earth to do something with them. And all the earth is going to do is hold them and like, We don't know what to do with this stuff. So the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, the IPCC, it was formed in 1998 by the World Meteorological Organization. And they say this, that the human activities are responsible for a worldwide average temperature increase of between 1.4 and 2.2 degrees Fahrenheit on an annual basis. And most of the warming over the second half of the 20th century is attributed to human activities.
Mm.
Most of the warming. And just like we can do the warming, we can find ways to minimize that. But man has to want to do that part, where you have organizations that do, people with money that want to make things and, I don't know, have products to sell, take that away from us. So going to the part about Florida, and Florida being the hottest state. So in Miami, they are seeing temperatures averaging 88 to 90 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and you say, well, why is Florida, that part of the state, so hot? Now, if you weren't paying attention in your science classes when you were in elementary or middle, junior high school, you were taught that, well, because you're close to the equator. And the equator is that invisible band that goes around the world, and it's warm around the equator. Again, it's a scientific phenomenon. I can't explain it. Only one person can explain it, and I think he sits up there in the sky and kind of laughs about his creation, because it's like, how did that happen? How can you do that? How can you have half the world go from warm to cold by going from middle to the top and from middle to the bottom? That's just the way it works.
North Pole, South Pole.
North Pole, South Pole, but the equator split the planet in half, and that's where it's warmest. So in Africa, South America, those places that are close to the equator, you get warmer temperatures. And then the hottest place in Florida is Fort Myers, with an average temperature of 85 degrees. Miami's getting hotter, but the average temperature in Fort Myers is 85.
Mm.
Wow. So they don't get many breaks about, cool weather. Your plant life is always growing green and prosperous. But then here in Florida, on the opposite side of that spectrum, the coldest place in Florida, Crestview, Florida, which is in the Panhandle, and it has an average degrees of 53 degrees. So Florida sees both hot and cold. So, if you get too hot, go to Crestview. If you get too cold, go to Fort Myers. I mean, that's why people leave the north and come to Florida, because it's too cold. They come down here during the warm months and go back up there when it's spring through summer. Mm-hmm. Now, the WUSF, WUSF, which was at the University of South Florida, says the warmest months in the state of Florida are March and November. And they're typically up in temperature by 4.5 to 5.3 degrees from the average, respectively, by that month. So these 2 months are getting warmer. And the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, in 2022 said that Florida hit a new record, the 5th hottest year in the state's history in 2022, the 5th hottest year. Mm. So we have some things going on here in the state of Florida that we have to be cognizant of and mindful of, and and that's why the state of Florida is considered the hottest state, because we're in that realm. On an average, there's not that warm in Crestview, Florida, on a regular basis, but in southern mid to southern Florida, it is. So we see that happening, and uh, while an increase in a couple degrees may seem trivial, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, any increase in temperature can have serious effects on the environment. Any increase can have an effect. And Dr. Ryan McMines at the University of South Florida is very conscious and cautious of the effect that it has on the coral reef ecology and the evolution going on, because the tipping point of these reefs is what they call extinction, excuse me. And what they have is these reefs, what they call, get bleached out. They have color and animals and other microbes and things living there, but when they go bleached out, so imagine having a colored shirt and you put it in bleach, and then when you take it out, it's completely white. When these coral reefs get completely bleached out, it's basically dead. It looks pretty, but it's dead. And that is something that he's very mindful of. And the climate change is causing our Florida reefs to have that type of effect. And that type of effect on our Florida reefs causes some economic impact to our $1 billion tourism trade that we have in the state of Florida. So again, the domino effect, one thing affects the other thing, which affects one more thing. So your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, ma'am?
It goes back to what you said. Everything depends on everything. So it is, you have your marine life. And as you said, with the coral reefs, we have the micro marine life that's living in that, that's nourishing, that's being nourished and being nourishing for the reefs. And then you have the plant life that is being depended on by the marine animals. And so when we get very concerned when we see whales start beaching up on our shores. We're wondering what disturbed their pattern. What has happened, and then of course, a lot of us depend on seafood. So the food as what we eat every day, and so with that being affected, that gets into our bodies, and once disease start happening in our bodies, now we need health care to treat it. Hopefully it's curable, but in most cases it's not. And so that affects our insurance industry, as well as our bottom line of what's coming into our household. So with all of this, I mean, it works hand in hand. And one of the things that I was looking at as far as what can we do as the people of our earth to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do. One of them is to eliminate plastic from our daily use. The other things is be conservative about our water, because one of the things that we learned in doing bringing these segments to you is that once your fresh water supply is gone, it is gone. You can't get it back. It can't be reproduced. And so, as Earl was bringing up earlier about the glaciers that are disappearing, that means that the animal life that depends on getting their food while being on the surface of that ice so that they can properly eat. If they have to hunt in the ocean, that's not good at all. All right, so now it's time for us to go to our break, and we want to thank you for listening to the Kitchen's Table. We bring it to you every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. And we bring to you hot topics that we feel that we need to be discussing at our kitchen table, around with our families to see how we can make this a better day. Any thoughts on what I just said, Earl?
No, Ronline, I mean, those points are very valid, and we must at least pay attention. I mean, you may not adhere to them, but you have to pay attention. You have to be conscious of what's going on. And, when we understand that the country we live in is warming up, we don't too much hear about the other countries around the world, but the global warming has an effect everywhere. And, one of the things we have to be mindful here in the state of Florida and on the East Coast is when the air temperature gets warmer, it is a conduit for hurricanes. And the warmer the air, and definitely if the water is warmer too, the stronger the hurricanes. And we know the devastating effect of hurricanes. Uh, Unlike the West Coast, they may deal with more of typhoons, and that is a very deadly weather phenomenon. So we have to be mindful of these things, and man just can't willy nilly do whatever he wants to do in the name of economic impact or making money, because when you don't have the resources, when some of the things that you depended on to create products or things of that nature are gone, then what happens? You have to find other ways to get it done, or you just can't get it done anymore. So, yeah, you make some valid points, and we have to again be mindful. And when you talk about seafood, it's an interesting thing that you brought that up. It's an interesting thing because food that we get from the sea is very abundant, very, very abundant. However, is very fragile, and it can go away in the blink of an eye, simply because man has done some things to cause that to be an issue. And those are not things you really want to see happen. If you're comfortable and you like to eat shrimp or scallops, oysters, crabs, and you go to the market and the guy at the seafood market or in your grocery stores in the seafood section, and they tell you, well, yeah, you can get this pound of shrimp for $25 or $30, is because the limited supply, the supply is going down. An abundant supply, they can charge less. When that supply goes lower, prices go up. And if man is going to continue to destroy the world with the need to have all these things that he wants to create for the sake of making money, something's going to suffer. Finding a balance is what is needed, and that's not always the case.
Mhm.
And that's something that those of us who might be conscious of that fact, more on lean, are mindful of it. Other folks, it's just like with recycling. How many people do recycling or don't?
Right.
And
Oh, yeah, that's so key. And let's go back. Let's take flooding for back to what you were saying about the hurricanes and things like that. And so, just think about a farmer who's dealing with flooding in the crops, and our trees depend on being able to stand upright. So, if any of those things happen, that's our produce, that's everything. And then of course our animals that we depend on, so. And then when you talk about I remember that campaign, you got to pitch in and clean up America. I still remember
right,
that song, you know
right.
so those are the things that we can do as a community effort to keep our communities clean. Everyone is living in one. So take a day out the week, to pick up the trash and put it where it belongs, and put the recycle things that can be recycled into the recycle bins so that they can be discarded properly and used properly as well. Don't have to go through the garbage and hunt for it. It's already there.
Right.
So you
Right.
brought up some great points. Our habitat. We need fresh water, right? And they say stop poisoning our water by pouring chemicals into
That's
our
right.
drains.
That's right.
So
That's right.
yes, it's all kind of things that we can take care of at home, and stop wasting water. It's like even when you're brushing your teeth. If you're not using the water, stop letting it go down the drain. Cut it off until you're done brushing your teeth, and then swig your mouth or whatever, and keep it moving. So
Yeah. It's all a conscious effort.
yes.
It's a conscious effort to do things, little things. I mean, conserving water. I definitely notice a difference in the garbage when I recycle, because I think about all the stuff that I would put in the recycle bin. If I wasn't putting in the recycle bin, it would go in with the regular garbage. That's a lot of waste.
Mm-hmm.
And for those folks who have families and you don't recycle, you're not helping. You're not helping. So when you finish with the cereal box, crush it, put it in the recycle bin. When you finish with those bottles and glasses, rinse them out, put them in the recycle. You do not need to throw them. But that's a subject for a whole nother day. But all that, again, affects the warming. So let me give you a rundown of the warmest states in the United States. Here are the top 10 based on average temperatures. And again, let me go back and say average temperature. This is not the temperature that it is all the time. This is an average. And people, misconstrue that term. Well, the average temperature is like, okay, that means it's like that all the time. No, it's not like that every day. That's the point. 50 plus 60 plus 60 is 170, and you divide that by 3 and it gives you a different number. That's an average.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to keep that in mind. But top 10 states, the top 10 warmest states in America. At number 10 with an average temperature of 62.8 degrees Fahrenheit,
Mm.
Oklahoma. And I want you to pay attention to where all these states are. I
Yes.
want you to take a line and just draw it across the middle of the United States. And that separates north from south.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to understand. And again, going back to the fact that, well, the closer you are to the equator, the warmer it is. So those countries down in Central America and South America, and those countries that are on that the equator cuts through in Africa, and the islands that's out there in the islands, that's why they're tropical, because they're close to that warm line that goes around the world, and it keeps everything in a nice, perfect setting. You go to the islands for cruises and stuff, and it's always warm. You travel to some of these islands, it's always warm. It's like, does it ever get cold here? No, man. Never cold here. Always nice and sunny, man. It's always about say 79, 80 degrees, man, on a cool day. That's a
Mm.
cool day, man. Cool
Mm.
day. No, hot day, man, it's 95, 99 degrees, man. But we love it down here. So Oklahoma's at 10 at 62.8. Arkansas,
Mm.
62.8, number 9. Arizona, average temperature, and this is what I was telling you, 62.9.
But can rise up in the hundreds.
It can get in the hundreds. So
Mm-hmm.
it's 100 today, it's 50 tomorrow. You add those two numbers together, so your average temperature is what? 75. At number 7, South Carolina at 65.4. Alabama is 6th at 65.4. Mississippi is 5th at 66.1. Georgia is fourth at 66.2, 1/10 of a degree.
Mm.
1/10. Third place, Texas, 68 degrees. In second place, Louisiana, 68.5. Now, I know you probably wouldn't have thought Louisiana to be, that warm, but there it is. And then at the top, holding on to number one, 5 degrees higher than Louisiana and 10 degrees higher than Oklahoma, Florida. Average temperature, 73.4. So they also broke it down and gave us the average temperatures in the summer. So Florida's average temperature in the summer is not the highest. The highest temperature by state in the summer is Texas at 84.8 degrees.
Yes, when you mentioned Texas being in that roll call, I thought about it too. I was like, yeah, that's another state that when I hear about the temperature there, it's mind boggling. I was like, okay. And at once upon a time, I was considering living there.
Yep.
Yes. And then they said in Arizona, they have if you deny anybody of asking you for water and you don't, if you have water and you don't give it to them, that's critical. That's a fine,
You get fined for that?
I was told you get fined for that. So yes,
Wow.
just that critical because a person can be on the brink of life and death. And so if you're depriving that person, because you don't want to give it to them or whatever, and you get reported, that's you.
Well, that's an interesting legal action to know that a state will fine you for not giving someone some water. But the extremely hot temperatures that you'll see out in Arizona, and it's funny because the states around Arizona, New Mexico and Nevada, you don't hear about their temperatures being that warm. And then not too far from that is California. And it's amazing that California is not on this list as one of the top 10 hot states by average temperature. But
Yeah, I was surprised when you said Oklahoma. I was like, okay, and of course California's not that far from them. But yeah, when I didn't hear California in that roll call, I was surprised. So
okay, so you know why, right?
why? Because of the floor climates that they get.
So in the southern part of California, it becomes very hot. In the northern part of the state, not so much.
Okay.
So they take the entire state. That's why it's by state. It says state average. So
Mm-hmm.
if it's 90, if it's an average of 85 in San Diego and LA, and it's an average of 60 in the San Francisco and northern before you get to Oregon, when you combine the two of those, but again, their average temperature, if this is correct, is below 62.8 degrees average for the state, not for LA and San Diego but for the entire state. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why you have to understand that when we say average for the state, you have to take from Pensacola to the Keys, you take those two opposites and add them together and divide them by 2 or whatever number you have to divide, and that'll give you the average. And for those of us who took statistics, you have an average and you have a mean and so on and so forth. So anyway, but yeah, Texas is the hottest state in the summer, average, on an average, not always. So Florida's at number 1. So we wanted to bring you some of that information. And then finally, let me give you this last little bit of trivia. Alaska averages 36.5 degrees, North Dakota 42.3, and Montana 42.8. St. Louis, Missouri is ranked as the hottest city United States in the past 15 years with an average temperature of 83.3 degrees. And Fairbanks, Alaska is ranked as the coldest city in the United States with an average temperature of 29.5.
Mm.
Okay, so there you have it. So, Ronline, we're going to let you come and give us our Black History moment of the day. And I know
Uh,
you got somebody special today.
yes, we do. Yes, we do. And so we want to present to you today Dr. Gladys B. West. Um, this woman is phenomenal. She was a mathematician. She's retired now. She's living out her days. She's 93 years old, young, and she's the author of It Began with a Dream. So I recommend everybody to read that. And let me tell you, um, some people may know her and some people do not, but everyone benefits off of the technology called the Global Positioning System. And what is the Global Positioning System? That is what you know as the GPS or the navigation system. Yes, the thing that helps us get around when we're lost, trying to find our way. And some things I just want to point out to you all. She and in her day she was an activist because she experienced, I mean, she was born in the 1930s, coming through that era. So her being African American, she was, reached in some of the first or some of the seconds. If we would think about our hidden figures ladies, she was will qualify as one of our hidden figures into the mathematician world. And so in the mathematics world, should I get it that way? And so what I want to say about her is that when you're using that technology and when you're dealing with children who, we're talking about global warming today and the climate change and how to be, how we're affected. She was one of those people who had the study of the earth to be taken seriously. Those our environment is so important, and she was one of those ones that took things seriously. On Wikipedia, they have some of her publications out there. I ask each of you to start reading those publications, to see what you can do in order to make things better for you just around your household. Any improvement is a great improvement. I'm thankful that she was able to start receiving some of the awards that she has. She's in the United States Air Force back in 2018. She was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and she was also awarded the Webby Lifetime Achievement Award for the development of the global positioning system known as the GPS. And so those were just a few things that she was recognized for. And Earl, thank you so much for allowing me to bring that back to you. And again, get a book. It began with a dream.
Well, thank you for bringing that to us, Ronline. So now we know where GPS comes from.
Yes.
And just like the ladies from Hidden Figures, I'm going to call her Dr. Gladys West, came up with a way to navigate around places so we can get to where we need to get to. And we're thankful for her. Thank you, Dr. West, for your work and your efforts in coming up with this great scientific uh, invention, because you use it, but you don't know how it works. Just like with a cell phone, you use it, you don't know how it works. But somebody
I'll benefit.
had an idea and created it. So there we have it. So Dr. Gladys West, thank you, Ron Lee, for bringing that to us. Well, we're at the end of our day. It seemed like we just got started, and and we were hot, and now we got to be cool because we got to go. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in today, and we hope that we'll see you next Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. on the Kitchings table. For Ronline Cannady, I'm W. Earl Kitchings saying, hey, as we share with you each and every week, do something good for somebody else today. All right? Take care. Till next time. Bye-bye.